Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Ghost of the Himalayas, Searching for the Snow Leopard, is brought to you by NatHab Expedition Leader Faiza Mookerjee. Faiza studied sociology while starting her career as a scuba dive master at 19 and worked on marine research projects studying sharks off of India's west coast and marine mammal diversity in the Arabian Sea. She managed a wildlife lodge in the Himalaya foothills and has specialized in guiding wildlife tours since 2019, particularly in Ladakh's trans-Himalayan region, searching for snow leopards and in central India's tiger reserves. As an accomplished naturalist who edited a photographic field guide about southern Indian wildlife, Faiza combines her sociology background with extensive expertise in both marine and terrestrial ecosystems across India's diverse region. Faiza, we appreciate you joining us today. The show is yours. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Rob. That was a really nice introduction. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll be presenting about a place in India which is very close to my heart. And today it's going to be more of a preparatory sort of a presentation, a know before you go, especially for those who have either signed up for this trip for the coming season or are considering it and are curious to know more about how this trip is going to be. So just to go sort of further now, just a little overview of what we are going to be covering on in this presentation. To start with, I'm going to go over the general geographic orientation of where we are, why this place is so unique, and trust me, like geographically, geologically, many things, it's quite a fascinating area. In terms of the next point will be a general basic. I'll go over the itinerary and the kind of places we'll be staying at. And after that, we'll be going over the general wildlife experience on this trip. Now, the snow leopard trip is quite different in terms of the average wildlife trip, at least in India. And, I'll be going in over detail as to why that is. Thereafter, we'll go over what kind of species we are expected to see on this trip. And the next point, the most important, is how to prepare for this trip. So in terms of what to pack, what kind of optics to carry, and a few other points. Finally, ending with some of the common questions that I've often got, for this trip. And then, of course, at the end, we'll go over the question and answers that you all will have after the presentation. So to start with, now, the land of the snow leopards, Ladakh, is at the northernmost tip of India. And this is if you look at the map on the left side, you can sort of see that in terms of most of India is quite green in color, and Ladakh right on top is in a spot which is amongst many of the mountains. Now, the key thing that sets it apart and sort of makes it such a unique landscape is because if you look at, say, the map on the right, and you see the mountain range on top, the Himalayas, or the Himalayas as we call them, the Ladakh is basically right beyond the Himalayas. So they're in the rain shadow of the Himalayas, and therefore it's also called the Trans-Himalayas, this Trans-Himalayan region, as you can say. Now, being in the rain shadow, this means that this region is basically a cold desert, because these massive mountain ranges, the highest mountains in the world, block all the moisture-laden winds that come in from the oceans on either side of India, making it a very dry area. And also basically all the cold winds that come in from the north, from Tibet, from further north, Ladakh receives all of those, making it a very sort of unique habitat. And the average sort of altitude that you can expect in this area is literally between 11,000 feet to almost 15 to 16,000 feet, at least in terms of where people are living. Of course, it goes higher up from there. So yes, that's just to give you an orientation of where you'll be going on this journey. Now coming back to our itinerary. So to start with, as you can see, we will be starting at New Delhi and we'll be making our way up north to Leh and then Rumbak. So arrival in terms of day one will be spent in New Delhi, and we will be checking into a lovely hotel called the Roseate House in New Delhi. Now, this is a slight change from the last season and a welcome change. This is in the Aero City, so it's very close to the airport. So getting in and out will be a lot more easy. And a lovely hotel, which is sort of known for its, spacious green spaces around and very nice sort of general aesthetic, hospitality, and all of those things. And so, yeah, so day one, we will settle in, and by the evening, by around 5:36 p.m., the expedition leader will be meeting you for an orientation and a lovely welcome dinner where we'll just tell you about the rest of the trip and everyone will just get to meet. Day two basically is the day that we fly from New Delhi to Leh. Now we'll be leaving at a pretty early morning flight at around 6:37 a.m. and we'll be leaving at least a good 2.5 hours before the departure time for the flight. Now this is largely because Indian airports can be a little chaotic, and especially for those who might be traveling for the first time, it can be there are a few things which are slightly different. For example, our security. When you get in through security, we have to pull out all your electronics, and there's an entire process which, of course, the expedition leader will brief you extremely well and will be with you the whole time. So, it shouldn't be a problem, but it's just good to keep time in hand and go through that entire process. So the flight from Delhi to Leh is just about an hour long. And if the clouds are, if the weather is on our hand, the views are some of the best views. We'll be flying literally over the entire Himalayan range. So that's really something to look forward to. And yes, we land in Leh, which is, the capital city of Ladakh. And yeah, it's at about 11,500 feet, which is quite something in terms of how sort of bustling a city it is at that altitude. And Leh has about a population of almost 45,000 to 50,000 people, and the Leh city itself. And yeah, it's quite a melting pot of different cultures in terms of it being a part of the Silk Route at one point. So it has a very interesting history. Now we check into the Grand Dragon Hotel in Leh, and this is definitely one of my most favorite hotels in the country. Considering it's at 11,500 feet, they do a brilliant job of everything in terms of the services, hospitality, the warmth that place provides. And this is actually the perfect place to start our journey, simply because the first 2 days of this trip, especially once you reach Leh, is all about acclimatizing and getting our bodies used to the altitude. Now, if you noticed in the previous map, we have actually jumped from Delhi to Leh in 1 hour and have gone basically from sea level to 11,500 feet. So our body has gone through such a huge shift that it will take a while to acclimatize, and we need to give that time to it. So day two, or the first day in Leh, is all about that. We don't have any activities planned for this day. This day is all about just resting and hydrating and enjoying the views from your beautiful rooms. So we spend the day sort of relaxing, and by the evening we will meet up again and again have a briefing, and the expedition leader will prepare you for the rest of the trip. Now, in terms of acclimatization, one important thing is that there is always a doctor on call in Leh, and especially at the Grand Dragon. So that's something we don't need to really worry about. And there is also oxygen available at all the places that we will be, on during this trip. So the ELs will be taking good care of you. And yes, so now day three is generally, I like to call it the rehearsal day. It's basically a day where we go on a day trip out, exploring, seeing what the sort of landscape is all about. But it's also a day where you get to test your body. You hopefully Also, in case you have not had a good night's sleep and you are feeling the altitude, sometimes we actually ask people, skip this day, because what's most important for you is to acclimatize so that you're good for the rest of the trip, the major actual important chunk of the trip where we're going to be wildlife viewing. But of course, day 3 is also a beautiful day where we'll be heading out to basically get an idea of the beautiful sort of cultural side of things in Ladakh. But mind you, when I say that, the other important thing in Ladakh is that, unlike, say, an area where you enter a national park and start looking for wildlife, Ladakh is very special because we are constantly scanning. This landscape, I mean, you are surrounded by mountains, and if you're driving, you're walking, we always have an eye out for wildlife. So even day 3, when we're heading out, we will be keeping an eye. As you can see, we'll be going to some beautiful mountains and some beautiful landscapes, especially in terms of the geology. Some of these rocks, I mean, Ladakh is pretty fascinating for those of you who are interested in rocks and geology. It's quite a mind-blowing landscape. These are the vehicles, Innovas, that we'll be using through the entire trip, and they're extremely comfortable and sort of the fail-proof, vehicle that we have figured works best in this region. Thankfully, the roads are quite good in Ladakh, and because it's a low rainfall area and it's a cold desert, we don't always need four-wheel drive vehicles here, and these vehicles do a really good job for this trip. So yeah, just to give you a little idea of some of the really cute things that we see on the way. So day 3, of course, you'll be getting into seeing some of the really nice villages. One of the villages we're going to be going to is called Gya, which is actually one of the oldest villages in Ladakh. And yeah, I won't tell you too much because it'll ruin the surprise, but it's a fabulous experience to visit. Now, day 4, we will be heading to the House of Rumbak, which is basically the main place that we'll be spending 5 days, the rest of the trip. And I mean, this lodge is designed for wildlife viewing in the Himalayas. And as you can see, it has been built just literally to blend into the mountains. And but mind you, the insides are quite luxurious and extremely comfortable. And it has floor heating and it's very warm, heated sort of blankets, mattresses. And as you can see, the views are fabulous from the rooms. The bathrooms are, one of the best things which is here is that there is running hot water, which, I'm smiling and saying this because until 2 seasons ago, the Snow Leopard trip basically didn't have running water from the taps. We would actually have water brought to you in buckets, and so it's great to see how sort of systems have advanced, and now we have this absolute luxury during this trip. The food here is absolutely really tasty. It's a mix of from continental to Indian to Ladakhi, and you'll get a choice of various different flavors, and of course your allergy sort of dietary restrictions and all of those things are managed quite well by them, and since we'll have a heads up, we will plan accordingly for that as well. Now, the main part of this trip and the people who make this trip what it is are the spotters. And they are truly the soul of this trip. They are people who have the most, I mean, I think they're superhumans. They find snow leopards and wildlife in the most incredible sort of places at distances which are very, very far. And a lot of them are actually ex-shepherds who have roamed these mountains with their livestock. And this has been an alternative livelihood for them and a new profession. And it's literally what they were doing already, where they were keeping an eye out and looking and scanning the mountains, but now they are looking for snow leopards instead. So it's a job that you can see that they take huge amounts of pride in and they enjoy thoroughly. So we'll be interacting with them a whole lot on this trip. Now, just to go over a typical day, and now I'm basically going to generally talk about the wildlife experience on this trip. So unlike other wildlife trips where there is, say, a safari of typical morning and afternoon drive, or where there are sort of fixed schedules, this particular trip has, I mean, I would say it's very flexible. So I always tell my guests, just be prepared to for anything to happen. And honestly, everything depends on what the spotters say. So a typical day starts, early in the morning. The spotters will basically head out and start scanning the valleys at the first light, and many of them will spread out with, and split themselves amongst the valleys around where we are staying. Now, we are basically, the lodge is adjacent to one of the largest national parks in the country. It's called Hemis National Park. And I didn't really mention it as a key point simply because I really believe that all of Ladakh is like a national park, because there is so much wilderness that literally 5% of about 50,000 square kilometers is populated, and the rest of Ladakh, the rest of the area is just wilderness. But that being said, this area is the Hemis National Park, and where House of Rumbak is an extremely, extremely great habitat for snow leopards and all the other sort of wildlife that we'll be seeing here. So yeah, coming back to a typical day, the spotters start scanning, and for us, we will be starting our day a little later. So generally wake up is at about 7 or 7:30. And the best part about this trip is that you actually get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, unlike other safari wildlife trips where, we all know how that turns into sometimes with consecutive days of safaris. But here you actually do get to rest a little. And trust me, you will need it and want it, because at that altitude, your body really takes a lot more energy basically. So yeah, so we start breakfast by around 8, and by then we will let you know what the plan for the day is. So quite often, it all depends on what the spotters might see in the morning, what they might have seen the day before. It really varies. So thereafter, we will either go, for a hike somewhere, based on what the movement might be, or we might actually just, go on a hike and be out the entire day. And sometimes food comes to us where we are. And this is actually quite a common situation, because sometimes we might drive out so far and get news that there's a sighting of a snow leopard, and we will stay put over there, and you don't want to let go of a snow leopard, so obviously the food will come to us. So that happens too, and you have these beautiful backdrops where we enjoy our meals. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the sightings that do happen on this trip in terms of preparing you. So we must realize that this is the hardest cat to find in the world. And trust me when I say this, I mean, the kind of distances that we are scanning in, and the kind of the scale, the sizes of the animals that you are looking at, is incredible. And small things like, you don't always have tracks to follow. I mean, clear tracks, right next to you, or alarm calls that otherwise in, say, tropical forest comes in handy. Here we are largely going by just visual scanning, and therefore sometimes sightings can be a little far away. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about how sort of it could look in certain scenarios. Now, again, this is a photo of just a random patch of the mountain, and there is anyway, that arrow wasn't supposed to come. I'm sorry. Yeah. So anyway, now there's a snow leopard there, but basically just to give you an idea of how well they camouflage in this landscape. And so that leopard with its sort of tail over here and its ears here, body, and it's basically licking the snow and trying to sort of get some water intake. But you can see how it really basically just looks like one of the rocks around. And truly, I mean, the animals in this habitat, according to me, are some of the most incredibly well adapted to the landscape, to the climate, to the hostile climate. And that also makes it that much harder to spot them. And but also just amazing to just admire what they are capable of and what they've evolved to become. Now, this is another photo which is quite a fun one. I mean, I love playing these spot the snow leopard photo games, but I don't know if you can see them, but there's definitely more than one in this photo. I'll give you a few minutes to try and spot them. And I'll also tell you a little bit more about this sighting. So this incredible photo is by my friend and also an expedition leader, Surya Ramachandran. And what an amazing natural history moment this was. So yeah, there basically is a mating pair of snow leopards and a young subadult over here, watching this. And you can imagine how bizarre, I mean, how surprised we were. So we first actually saw the snow leopards mating. And just while scanning and just looking around, one of the spotters said there's a third snow leopard. And it basically was a mother and, cub who hadn't yet completely left her. So yeah, she sort of went ahead and mated while he didn't before he could leave. Anyway, this was quite a special sighting and quite a rare naturalistic moment to witness, and it also goes to show that with snow leopards we are still finding out so much more. We don't know that much, and that's simply because of the terrain that they live in, and which is why every trip, even for all of us, from guests to ELs to the spotters, every sighting is that much more exciting, because we are actually seeing new things every season, every trip, and documenting and collating some really sort of valuable information about these incredible creatures. So now I'm going to just talk about some of the species that we're going to be seeing on this trip, apart from this particular species. So Ladakh being a pretty special habitat, this also means that the animals that you see here are that much more interesting. And by this I mean many of them are found nowhere else in the world. And like I was saying, they are extremely well adapted to this hostile sort of landscape. But what also makes them interesting, what also makes it interesting, is almost all of them have not been very well studied. And I would say that the kind of information that we have is literally starting from the 70s and 80s. That's how recent, they began to be studied. And snow leopards, for example, in India, we had our first census just about 2 years ago, and that's how recently we found out a close population estimate. And before that, it was a very vast sort of estimate. So therefore, all the animals that you're going to be seeing on this trip are incredibly sort of interesting to observe. So starting with the birds, the chukar partridge. Now, this one is a bird that you might be familiar with in the US as well, because they were released in the US for game hunting, many years ago. But this is native to Ladakh, and one of the most sort of beautiful birds that you'll often see around villages and around, homes. Many raptors to see on this trip, starting from the left side, which is a bearded vulture or a lammergeier. And fascinating birds, because they are actually known to drop bones from like sky high heights, and so that they can break and eat the marrow, and have been seen to be ingesting bones, entire bones. So it's a bird that is found in the rest of the world too, but this Ladakh is one of the best places to see them up close and get very good views. Next in the middle is the Himalayan griffin, a massive griffin and vulture, which we have very good chances of seeing. And then, of course, the most beautiful golden eagle. I'm sorry, the photo's been chopped off, but it was a bit hard to fit it in. Anyway, so the golden eagle, again, very good chances of seeing this absolutely sort of majestic raptor. And in fact, there are a couple of nesting spots around the lodge where we often see a pair, and they'll be sort of swooping down and catching chukars, and it's quite a sight to watch them. Now, some of the ungulates that we're going to be seeing on this trip, the Asiatic ibex, which is a mountain goat. So very good chance of seeing them. They're huge, and truly, like for me on this trip, of course, the snow leopard is the focus, and it is the most incredible charismatic species. But I love spending time with the ungulates too, because watching them traverse through this landscape is absolutely fascinating too. I mean, just to see, they are basically surviving on almost nothing in the winter, and it's amazing to see such large animals eat such tiny, almost, I don't know what they like. It's they're eating on seeds, on the like little bits of dried grass. It's quite incredible, and to also see them sort of maneuver through that kind of mountainside is quite amazing. So ibex, that's a big male ibex that is here. Now, the urial, or also called the red sheep, but I'm not a big fan of that second name. But the urial is the Ladakh urial is actually an endemic species to Ladakh, and one of the most sort of rare. By rare, I mean critically endangered species. They are found along the Indus Valley in Ladakh. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the species because then there won't be much left for you on the trip. But yeah, they are basically a wild sheep as compared to the ibex, which was a goat. And this means that they're found in a very different kind of habitat, in slightly more sort of slopes, easier terrain, because they tend to run longer distances as compared to the ibex, which tends to sort of walk along craggy, rocky areas and maneuver through that. So the urial, we have good chances of seeing. The bharal, or the blue sheep. Now, this is primary prey base for the snow leopards, especially in Rumbak, the valley where we will be. And we have plenty of opportunities of seeing blue sheep or bharal. In fact, sometimes you'll wake up in the morning and have a very good chance of seeing them right outside from your window itself. Again, amazing to see how they sort of scale these mountains, and you can just see how well they are camouflaged. I mean, just look at their coat. It is just the same color as the rocks behind, so it's pretty amazing to watch these creatures. Now, coming to the carnivores on this trip. Now, the Tibetan wolf, or the Himalayan wolf, we have good chances of seeing this, and I honestly love watching them as much as watching snow leopards. And they are quite a persecuted species in Ladakh, as they are in most parts of the world, unfortunately. But yes, wolves have been known to go after a lot of livestock, and especially because many of the communities in Ladakh are pastoral communities, they have really been sort of because of retaliatory killing, their numbers have dwindled in the last couple of decades. But things are changing, and of course there are very strict laws now, so people can't just kill them just like that. And of course mindsets have changed, so their numbers are coming back. We are seeing larger pack sizes. In the past, there used to be these extremely sort of deadly wolf traps, that were traditionally made for hunting them, and now they no longer exist. There are, there's been a lot of initiatives to stop that. So we have a very good chance of seeing wolves, and yeah, I really hope you get to see that on your trip. The red fox, or the Himalayan fox, a beautiful species, which it's the same species as what you see in Europe and North America as well, but yeah, a subspecies, found in the Himalayas. Now, fox are generally seen, in the evenings or in the mornings, and quite often you see them around the lodge itself. So we keep an eye out for them, and I won't be surprised if in the middle of the night you might hear a really sort of funny yelping sound, which is quite often the resident fox that lives around the lodge. So very good high chances of seeing the fox. Sorry, excuse me, I have a cold. So thanks. So there's a high chance of seeing a fox. And yes, coming to the sort of what we are coming here for, the snow leopard. The snow leopard in Ladakhi, in the local language over there, is called the Shan, and I love that name. So snow leopards are almost like the symbol of this landscape, and I truly feel like they are an absolutely perfect example of how a creature has adapted and evolved to just fit into this terrain so well. So just, I mean, with its absolutely long tail, with its short sort of legs, the way its nose, body, everything that has been designed for it to maneuver through this landscape. And yeah, I mean, you are on this trip in possibly one of the best places in the world to see snow leopards. And I can confidently say this because, in terms of just the way the tourism has been planned in this region, versus the number of spotters and how good they have got at figuring out their patterns, their sort of habits, that we have a really good chance. I mean, I feel like they have really figured out how to find these cats, which are absolutely so difficult to see in the wild, or were difficult to see in the past, but now you have really good chances. Um, so yeah, I mean, Ladakh, they are saying, I mean, estimating there are about 500 odd, or there's an exact number about 480 or something, but of course we know that varies. So there are almost about 500 snow leopards in Ladakh, but that number could, I would say, could be higher as well. Um, and yeah, we are still finding out so much about this species, and truly, it's something else seeing this cat in the wild, and especially when you see the kind of effort that goes into finding them, the sort of areas you see them, and when you see them do what they do, it is absolutely mind blowing. Now, coming to what to pack and generally how to prepare for this trip, starting with the optics, which is of course the most important part in terms of making your viewing experience, what it is. So the lodge itself has scopes. So we use a combination of Swarovski and Zeiss scopes, and um, the spotters will be using them to scan, but there are also enough scopes to sort of be shared by the entire group. And but along with that, we highly recommend you to carry a good pair of binoculars. And this really equips you to just have, I mean, of course, one of the major reasons is that, as I said, we are always scanning the mountains, and you can get lucky of with spotting various things. And of course, even if you don't spot a snow leopard, there are multiple birds, ungulates, smaller mammals, from pikas to wolves, to so various things to see. And it keeps you sort of busy through the day, and on your toes, and gives you access to finding things. So definitely binoculars. And so in terms of specs, either a 842 or 1042 works well over here. Anything above 10 is a little difficult, in terms of the higher the sort of magnification is, the harder, the shakier it gets, and the harder it gets to sort of get a stabilized image. And yeah, so those would be good. In terms of lenses for your camera, I would suggest, I mean, we suggest a minimum of 400 mm, and anything above that is great. You can carry an extender if that helps. And some certain cameras, I mean, I personally use something called a Nikon P1000, which I find really handy because it has a 3000 zoom and 4K video. So, and it's a point and shoot, so it's a handy camera to have. So those work really well too. I know Sony has a good equivalent as well. So that's one. In terms of, I mean, Ladakh is an absolutely stunning landscape too. So it does make sense to carry either a wide angle lens, or of course your iPhone often does the best job. And I tend to, especially with the iPhone or the other really good Androids, which have fantastic cameras. So for portraits, for landscapes, that does really well. That's a great way to sort of save space in terms of not carrying too many lenses. We will be we use adapters. So as you can see in this particular photograph, we have adapters that we attach to the scope that you can put your phone on, and that often is one of the best ways to get really great footage. I would say some of the best footage that we've got have been through scope adapters and iPhones. So generally in each group, we will have these around. In case you want to bring your own, you are most welcome to as well. But try and find the one which is a universal adapter that fits onto different kinds of scopes, because that can be quite tricky sometimes. So that was it about optics. Now, the most important part, and that is in terms of what we have to wear on this trip. So, a lot of this trip, in terms of how your experience goes, totally depends on your gear and what you wear on this trip. And you are truly, I mean, Ladakh is one of those places where we laugh and crack jokes about how you can be standing in one place and half your body will be in, say the shade and we'll get a frostbite, and the other half will be in the sun and we're getting absolutely heat stroked and sunstroke. So it's that extreme. Temperatures can really vary. And it does depend on which time of the year you come. So December, Jan, and Feb, of course, are the coldest times, where temperatures can, go down to 4 degrees Fahrenheit, or even, slightly lower sometimes. And of course, March, April are slightly warmer. But that being said, I actually always tell people to prepare the same way throughout, those couple of months, because anytime even in April, we have had times where it will suddenly snow and the weather will get really cold. So it's good to carry everything, for all the months, and, not get relaxed about that. So here's a list for to have to just keep in mind. Now, keep in mind that layering is your best option, on a trip like this. And it will be a combination of sometimes hiking, but there will also be times where we are sometimes just sitting in one place. This trip does require a lot of patience, in the sense that sometimes you might see a snow leopard and it could just be lying down in one place, and we could just be waiting the whole day in the same spot for it to waiting for it to get up. And sometimes in those situations it can get very cold, and you can actually experience multiple kinds of weather in just one day, from sun to snow to wind. And so therefore, it's good to sort of keep all these things in mind. So I generally try and sort of start with a thin, breathable layer. So sometimes, silks work. I mean, it depends on what suits you. And then after that, a layer of, say, a thermal underwear. Thereafter, a fleece, a thick fleece, and then after that, a down or a puffy jacket. And so in terms of down, it also makes sense to carry a heavy down, especially if you're coming in the winters. Sorry, if you're coming in, like, say, December, Jan, February, it makes sense to carry a thick jacket over the thinner down as well. So, all of these layers, you mustn't worry in terms of carrying it all, because we usually have our vehicles close by. So, it's easy to keep it all with us. And you sort of, I feel like through the initial, through day 1 to 3, by the end of it, you get a good idea of what suits you and what doesn't, and how the weather goes. Similarly, bottoms as well. Please carry pants which have, thermal insulation of, either a fleece lining or some sort of insulation, along with, of course, thermal underwear. I mean, innerwear as well for the bottoms. Socks, carrying thick socks is very important, and sometimes you might need 2 layers of a thin layer and then a thick woolen layer on top. For me, my toes and fingers are the first to always get frozen, and I really rely on, especially in the coldest weather, it really helps to carry these hand and foot warmers, and you just pop them into your shoes, and sort of it helps, it really does. So that is quite important. And of course, a cap to cover your ears, a buff. So we'll be providing, I think NatHab does provide a fleece buff, which is really helpful. So carry that. And another important one which people sometimes forget is a sun hat. So don't forget that even though you are coming to a very cold place, the sun at this altitude, at almost 14,000 feet, can be extremely strong. So it's very important to have either a wide brim hat or, like a cap for that. And of course, sunscreen, lots of sunscreen and moisturizer. This desert landscape can get extremely dry. And actually, one of the things I've not mentioned here, which you can add to the list, is electrolytes. You'll probably need to take them every day. I often encourage people, and sometimes we carry them on the trip as well. So that really helps. Hiking shoes. So it is important to have water resistant shoes with very good grip, but you need not have snow boots. We aren't going to be walking through very heavy snowfall. or ice. So the main thing is a good grip and water resistant, and shoes that are warm to an extent. Um, that is important. So, and it's also important to sort of, I mean, yeah, we will be inside the lodge, which is a very comfortable heated sort of a setup. So during that time, it's, you should keep a pair of comfortable clothes that, a fleece or some pajamas or trousers that you can wear in the lodge dining room. And so in the evenings in the lodge, when we come back from our long day, we actually have, sometimes we sit down and watch a film or sort of have a chat, talk about the day. So, you'll need some clothes for that as well. So those are the important things. I've also written a mask for flights. So in general, I have been advising everyone, and I think we've been doing this last season too, where we encourage people to wear masks, especially on flights. Um, you know, I literally don't think there is a flu season anymore, and there's just always a chance of catching a flu in any of these places. And as much as that's okay in a regular trip in sea level, in Ladakh, these kind of small niggling sort of health issues can often kind of get a little more serious because of because of the altitude and the general sort of cold and dryness. So there have been instances in the past where just someone has caught a cold and a bad sort of congestion from the plains, but it has got a little flared up up in Ladakh. So we have to be a lot more careful about these things once we come up here. So do keep that in mind. And of course, patience and a sense of humor. This trip can be, it can get challenging sometimes in terms of just the sort of conditions we'll be at, and as comfortable as we try and make it, it does count a lot to have that sort of keep that in mind and have a sense of humor and a good spirit through the whole thing. And patience is key on this trip. And as I mentioned earlier, there is often a good amount of um, waiting for wildlife sometimes, simply because it is the nature of the landscape over there. But we have lots of fun games that we have devised to keep you busy during those moments. Um, yeah, just a cute photo to give you an idea of how sometimes the scenes are over there when we have a sighting. This group has obviously had a sighting. You can see the smiles on their faces. And that's something that's I didn't talk too much about, but we can have a sighting literally from outside, if we go for a hike, but sometimes the sightings can literally happen from right outside the lodge. And that's what I mean in terms of, you know, plans being flexible. Sometimes, we actually tell our guests always be prepared, because you could just I could suddenly just come knock on your door at 7:30 in the morning and be like, there's a snow leopard sighting outside and we have to rush out. So it's exciting. There's always, things happening, and you will be on your toes. Um, a few other questions that often come up on this, for this trip. So number one, what are the fitness levels required for this trip? So this is a slightly, it's a question which can vary, because this trip itself is so flexible. So what I mean by that is that, there can be a combination of hikes, and if you are someone who enjoys going on long hikes and are used to the altitude, there are plenty of opportunities for you. But at the same time, if you are someone who is not so, okay to do that, we also have the option for you to drive to certain places, and also maybe take a break and just be at the lodge. There's enough people on the team to take care of you in both scenarios. That being said, one of the, in terms of the physical requirements for this trip is rated as a challenging trip in terms of the scale. And NatHab actually has a really nice interactive sort of new page up on the website, on the trip page for this, where you can have a look at what certain things to keep in mind, and what if this trip is for you in terms of fitness levels. But I would say, like, if you can walk about 3 miles on uneven terrain without sort of getting too tired, then this trip should be okay for you. So yeah, that should be good for that question. Number two, is there Wi-Fi available on this trip? So the only place where Wi-Fi won't be available is on those 5 days when we are in we are in Rumbak, in House of Rumbak, and so be prepared for an absolute, mind detox. It'll be fabulous. We have to keep each other company, and yeah, but we will be busy. So, you won't miss it. And the views are so fantastic. That's more than enough. But in terms of emergencies, if you do need to connect, and if someone needs to connect with you, then there is a village just, very close by where there is a local network. So you need a local SIM card for it to work. And the lodge connects there, and that is always there as an emergency. There is also an option of about half an hour to 45 minutes away from the lodge. If you drive out to the main road, you actually do get phone connectivity on the EL's phone, or the Indian sort of. So Ladakh has slightly strict rules around foreigners having their regular network working. So anyway, the ELs will share either a hotspot, or we can connect through that. But yeah, New Delhi and Leh, the Leh Hotel Grand Dragon does have Wi-Fi as well. Now, how accessible will medical help be? So, as I mentioned at the start of the trip, Leh will have a doctor on call. The House of Rumbak has a hospital about an hour away, and therefore it is important to know that medical help isn't um, sort of accessible immediately. So that being said, which is why the first 2 days are that much more important for you to acclimatize and sort of be healthy, so that you can be okay for those 5 days. But at the same time, oxygen is available at every point on this trip, including the vehicles. We do keep cylinders in the vehicle as well, and all rooms at every point will have oxygen available. Now, the last question is a question which, again, varies, but in general, in terms of how much money to carry on this trip, in terms of shopping and souvenir shopping, almost every shop in Leh has card machines, and so that isn't a problem. So, in terms of gratuities and tips, all tips on this trip are included except the expedition leader and the House of Rumbak team. So now this is, there is an option of covering this before you come or after you come via e-tipping, and so that shouldn't be an issue. So you don't have to carry that money. However, if you would like to, cover tips on site for these particular things, then you are most welcome to. And just as a sometimes people do say that smaller notes will be easier, but in this case I would also say that larger bills are often appreciated, and also easier for you to carry, so that you don't have to carry too much cash. So yeah, those are the options in terms of that part. So yeah, I mean, I think I have covered pretty much everything, and yeah, that's about it for me. Rob, over to you. Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Faiza. All right. Before we dive into the Q&A session, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have a question, feel free to submit them via the question field in your control panel. If you go to the upper right-hand corner, click on those 3 lines, go down to the question field and submit them in there. So let's ask some questions. What is the best time of year for me to come up there and see some snow leopards?
Okay, so the traditional season to see snow leopards is from January to April. Now, according to me, all of these months are equally good to see snow leopards, and I'm saying that simply out of experience. From Jan to April, I have had consistently good sightings. So the question is more about, in terms of weather, in terms of how cold you want to sort of experience this trip in, because Jan and Feb are extremely cold, and March, April gets a little easier in that sense. So those would be the only sort of deciding factors. But other than that, Jan to April is equally good any month of that time.
Gotcha. So if we did come there in January or February, would we have the possibility of snow?
Yes, there is a higher possibility of snow for sure. Definitely, it's the mountains are covered in snow in Jan and Feb. So the snow leopards that you see will have the backdrop of snow, on most days. If that is a nicer sort of thing. That being said, March, April, it has randomly snowed as well. So there is a chance, but definitely higher chance in Jan, Feb. Yes.
All right, so we'll be prepared for snow. Got it.
Yes.
How many people are going to be joining me in the group on this trip?
So this trip has I think a maximum number of 10 people on this trip. So yeah, anywhere between, I guess, 4 to 10.
So here's an interesting question. So if we do, because it's cold, we'll bring some winter clothes. And if we have some clothing that we don't want to bring home with us, is there a place that we can actually donate this clothing?
100%. And that's a really nice thought. It's definitely possible. There are multiple sort of places, people, from families in the village that we are staying at, to in Leh itself, there are multiple organizations. But it's definitely a possibility, and there are people who will highly, appreciate it as well.
Excellent, thank you. What is the elevation of the lodge?
So the lodge is at 12,800 feet at the lodge itself. But sometimes we do go a little higher up while hiking or driving up to about, 13,500 feet. But we will be sleeping at 12,800 feet.
Gotcha. Okay. So with all the hiking and walking we're doing, do you think having a good hiking boot is good? Should I have something with ankle support? Any recommendations on shoe wear?
Definitely ankle support is a very good thing to have, and good grip. I am not too familiar with brands as such, because I mean, the US has far more brands than we are used to over here. But definitely something with Gore-Tex or like good waterproof sort of soles and the rest of the shoe. But high ankle, good grip, and water resistant, waterproof would be important for sure.
Gotcha. Thank you. So can I arrive earlier than the trip starts if I want to acclimatize myself to the environment or see more of the town? Is that possible?
So I think on this trip, unfortunately, that may not be possible. I'll have to check on this, but generally the group leaves together from Delhi itself. So you could come to Delhi a few days earlier, of course, but in terms of reaching Leh and acclimatizing, I think that may not be possible. But yeah, I might have to get back to you on that.
Okay, no problem there. And so when we are doing some hiking, should we bring our own hiking poles, or will there be some available in case we need them?
The lodge does have hiking poles.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you. So are there any snow leopards that are actually tagged and tracked for research purposes?
That's a great question. So in the past, we've had snow leopards that have had a collar put. So they haven't been tagged in terms of like a chip, but they have been collared. And again, this is there hasn't been as much as there should be in terms of the kind of research, but they found some very interesting um, sort of observations after putting a collar on them. Like, for example, they actually saw a snow leopard cross the entire Indus River, which is a massive river. It swam across the river from one valley to the next and was found, at distances which were almost, 10 kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers away. So yes, that would be it. But again, I think there have been a total of 5 or 6 snow leopards till date that have been collared and tracked.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So is it okay if we walk outside the lodge? Is it going to be safe to walk around?
Absolutely. It's absolutely safe. In terms of wildlife, 100%. There have literally been 0 instances of snow leopard and human conflict in terms of people being attacked. So, they are not known to, they are known to keep a distance from, habitation in general. So that is not an issue and any other wildlife. And even in terms of people and humans, I mean, Ladakh is one of the safest parts of India, and it's actually a region which is very different from the rest of India, with an almost zero crime rate and very few people. So it's 100% safe.
What about the weather? Is it going to be windy and chilly? Do I need to bring my long underwear?
Yes, definitely need to bring your long underwear, and the weather could get windy and chilly at any point. So it can go from absolutely sunny to in a few minutes the winds can pick up, especially in the evening. So quite often we are out, till the sun goes down, and for anyone who's been in the mountains knows that once the sun goes down, the temperature just drops. So at that point, it can get quite windy and chilly and very cold.
Gotcha. Thank you. So is there any age restriction on this trip? Can I bring my a teenager or my mom with me?
I will have to actually check on that one in terms of what NatHab's exact age limit is. So I will get back to you on that. Please let me.
Gotcha. And if you do have a question about that, feel free to reach out to your adventure specialist. They can help you answer that question as well.
Thank you.
Will we need to have local currency for the trip, or can we use American dollars?
It's okay to have American dollars on this trip. That's not a problem. You don't have to have local currency.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I know it's hard to promise, but typically, do we see snow leopards on these trips? And will we see more than one? Any ideas?
Right. I was waiting for this question. So there is a very high chance of seeing snow leopards on this trip. And obviously, as all of you know, with wildlife, there are no guarantees. But at the same time, I mean, I can very sort of confidently and proudly say that till date, we have had 100% success rate on all our NatHab trips. We have seen a leopard. We have seen a leopard for sure. So there is a very high chance of seeing one. And there is a very high chance, I mean, that we have had trips where we have seen more than one leopard as well. So yes, that would be my answer.
Gotcha. Thank you. Swinging back to the lodge, what is the altitude at the Rumbek Lodge?
So the altitude is at about 12,800 feet at the Rumbek Lodge.
Gotcha. It's a little bit up. It's a little bit up there. Okay.
Yeah.
Do people have a problem with the altitude at all?
So it is common to have problems with the altitude, but that being said, just keeping the way the itinerary is planned, because the first day is so relaxed and the second day too doesn't have much walking, we're largely driving. That generally has people adjust to it pretty well. But it is quite common for people to feel uncomfortable and take oxygen on day one. And I always tell my guests there's no shame in that, and just please be communicative and open about it. And so there are cases where by the evening you might feel a headache, you might feel a slight lack of appetite, and the first night the sleep could be a bit uneasy. So those are very common mild symptoms. But because we take it easy the first 2 days, generally there aren't very serious cases of altitude sickness. But that being said, of course, there have been 1 or 2 cases, because some people's bodies just don't acclimatize, as much as we try. And in those cases, we have a doctor come in ASAP who advises, people on what to do, and we take it forward, based on, of course, what the the guest also would like to do after that.
Great, thank you for that. We appreciate that. So, if I'm coming all the way over there to the other side of the world, if I'm here in America, can we combine this with another trip to the Himalayas in northern India or Nepal or something?
Absolutely. I mean, this trip can be combined with the Tiger Quest trip, which is another trip, which is a slightly shorter trip of about 7 days. So you can definitely do this after the snow leopard trip. And of course, if you are feeling, adventurous and really want to spend a long time, you can do the Grand India trip, which is a fabulous wildlife experience of very different habitats in the rest of the country, where you're seeing tigers, rhinos, elephants, and get a very good overview of the major sort of megafauna and habitats of India. So you can very much combine the two together. And honestly, if you do both of those things, you have pretty much covered the major wildlife parks and habitats of India in that one trip. So we definitely recommend it.
Awesome. Great to know. All right. Let me ask you this question because I'm sure there are plenty of people who are curious about it. Are there
Mhm.
any place else in the world that snow leopards live, or can you only see them up in the
Mhm.
mountains there?
So snow leopards are found throughout starting from Kazakhstan, going all the way to Mongolia. And all the sort of regions in that belt are obviously like mountainous areas. So there's a very high population in China and Mongolia, and as much as there is in, say, Pakistan, Nepal, India, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. So these are the sort of countries where we see snow leopards. And yeah, I mean, in terms of a world population, there's a very large estimate that is there of, say, about from 3,500 to almost 7,000. That's what we think the population is spread amongst all of these countries. So yeah, that's where else you also see them.
Oh, thank you. So, how close have you been to a snow leopard?
Wow. Okay. So I have, in fact, I'm gonna go back to one of those photos. Yeah, this leopard was one of the closest sightings I have ever had. And she, of course, this at this point she had walked away a little further, but at one point this leopard was about 50 meters away from me. And that happens too. So as much as I've said that sightings are often quite far away, you can get lucky and have very close sightings too. It really is a matter of chance. And this leopard was a complete fluke. We were not looking for a snow leopard that day. It was an absolute it's probably one of the top three moments of my life, I can say. And it was she had we were literally just watching bharal, like blue sheep drinking water from the river by the side of the highway. And our guests had come to see some other wildlife, and snow leopards won the focus that day. And suddenly, in the middle of the afternoon, 12 o'clock, we see this animal just sort of trotting down the hill and coming towards the blue sheep. And then we noticed, I mean, our first thought was wolf, except then we noticed how long the tail was. And then we realized, oh my God, it's a snow leopard. And yeah, she attempted a hunt, and then she actually came down to the river, and parts of the river were frozen. So she came and crossed and stood in the middle of the river. And at that point, we were a good 50 meters away from her. We made eye contact, we looked at each other. And the one thing I've noticed about snow leopards are they are not skittish. They are not sort of, they don't immediately run. So she very sort of in this cool, confident, calm way turned around and casually just walked back and sat, perched herself there and watched us for a while. So that was my closest sighting.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. She is absolutely beautiful and majestic and amazing. Um, well, unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'm going to throw it back to you for any closing comments you want to share with us.
Well, I mean, the one thing I would like to say is that this trip is quite a special trip in the sense that although it is, of course, a wildlife trip, it really gives you a great overview on the geology, the culture, the Buddhist nature. I totally forgot to mention that this entire region is Buddhist, which is truly like makes it very special in a lot of ways. And so it's a very overall and all-round experience of this destination. And yeah, I feel like always tell my guests, just treat it as a as a whole and not just focus on the one big cat. And you will have an amazing trip by the end of it. So yeah, I really hope you join, and this presentation sort of encourages you to come and join me on the trip.
Faiza, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab and see snow leopards, give us a call at 800-543-8917, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow. Actually, join us Monday for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. So long, everybody. We'll see you next week.